Brexit's face, denying the electorate the chance of having its say in how this matter should be resolved. This Parliament is a dead Parliament. It should no longer sit. It has no moral right to sit on these green benches, and whatever they don't like to hear it, Mr. Speaker. They don't like the truth. Twice they have been asked to let the electorate decide upon whether they should continue to sit in their seats while
Westminster is no longer a hall of governance, it is a graveyard of broken promises. At exactly 5:15 p.m, the Whitehall varnish didn't just crack, it was pulverised by the very people who were supposed to protect it. Sir Keir Starmer, the man who campaigned on integrity, is currently watching his own Labour MPs launch a formal constitutional no-confidence vote against him. This isn't a rumour from the corridors, it is a politically volcanic eruption, triggered by what is being called the ultimate Brexit betrayal. From the secret deals in Brussels to the explosive chamber attacks by Nigel Farage, the verdict is in. The Prime Minister is cornered, furious, and functionally finished. The turkeys have finally realised that Christmas has arrived early for the Starmer administration. To understand the fury in the chamber, you have to look at the arithmetic of betrayal hidden in the secret Brussels deal. While the Prime Minister assured 17.4 million voters that sovereignty was sacred, the leaked terms tell a different story. We are talking about a sovereign capitulation that hands British fishing rights back to EU vessels until 2038. It reintroduces the oversight of the European Court of Justice, putting foreign judges back in charge of British laws under a backdoor scheme that the Supreme Court has already scrutinised. For the MPs in the Red Wall coastal towns, this wasn't diplomacy, it was a surrender of the very survival of their communities. The knives are out because the MPs can no longer look their constituents in the eye and defend the indefensible. The most noticeable news today wasn't just the vote, it was the man at the centre of it. Witnesses describe a Prime Minister who has lost the composition of calm his communications team worked so hard to maintain. Starmer reportedly erupted in a reactive, cornered rage, slamming his fists and shouting at the very colleagues whose loyalty he had already exhausted. In the newsroom, we call this the zombie phase. When a leader resorts to reactive desperation, it signals to the world that the machinery of political management has reached its operational capacity. The Prince of Human Rights has been unmasked as a leader who believed he could govern without consequence, only to find that the democratic system still has teeth. While Labour implodes, Nigel Farage and Reform UK are providing the rocket fuel for this rebellion. By connecting the covert EU schemes to this open surrender, Farage has effectively liquidated the authority of the front bench. The 17.4 million voters who chose Leave are not an abstraction. They are the living, breathing centre of this reckoning. They gave the system one last chance to deliver accountability, and instead they watched a strategic electorate expansion design. The polls now show Reform surging toward a majority, as the public realises that the stable Britain promised at the dispatch box was nothing more than a managed decline. Keir Starmer may still be sitting on the green benches tonight, but the moral right to govern has vanished. The no-confidence vote is a formal confirmation that the Brexit surrender was the bridge too far. The curiosity of the viewer shouldn't be about whether he survives the night. A leader who survives by a thread is a leader who has already lost the nation. The last orders for this administration have been called. The question is, who will have the courage to pick up the pieces of a fractured sovereignty? The silence from Downing Street is a confession. The game is over.
The room fell silent the moment the question was asked. No headlines, no slogans, no political choreography, just a blunt demand echoing across the committee floor. When will the migrant hotels finally close? Within seconds, the tension tightened, and for the first time in months, the Prime Minister found himself cornered. What followed was not just another parliamentary exchange, but a collision between a government under pressure and a system buckling under its own weight. This was the clearest glimpse yet into the immigration firestorm, now engulfing Britain. A crisis of overcrowded hotels, anxious communities and policies struggling to keep pace with reality. And one unsettling question is now gripping Westminster. Has Keir Starmer lost control of Britain's borders?
We do want, asylum hotels were at their height measured, I think it was 400 or so. They're down to about 200 now. I'm absolutely determined that we will close them by the end of this Parliament, sooner if it's possible, and that's why military sites are under consideration.
Can you understand the how local residents feel and the uncertainty there is? They've been told that they've been identified as a site. They don't know when it's going to open. They don't know what the clientele are going to be, and there is real concern. And the MPs that represent those areas have made representations to me as chair of the Select Committee. We really need to understand how this is going to affect local areas. Can you sympathise with that?
I do understand that.
It began with what sounded like an ordinary inquiry into accommodation planning, but it escalated with remarkable speed. MPs pressed the Prime Minister to explain why hundreds of asylum seekers remained in hotels despite repeated promises to shut them, and why military sites in Catterick, Crowborough and Inverness were being prepared quietly in the background. The committee chair pushed harder, warning that local residents had been briefed without receiving any timelines, impact assessments or even basic information. Many felt blindsided and abandoned. Starmer attempted to calm the room, repeating his pledge that the government wants to close them by the end of this Parliament. Yet as he spoke, it became painfully clear that this was no longer a question of policy, but of credibility. Communities are living with uncertainty, MPs said, and the government could not keep hiding behind vague assurances. When Starmer insisted that he had inherited record levels of claims and that the system was finally being repaired, the room did not soften. Instead, the exchange exposed a reality the government has tried hard to downplay: the sense that Britain's asylum system has drifted dangerously close to breaking point, while ministers scramble to regain control. Outside the walls of Parliament, the numbers paint an even sharper picture. More than 41,000 people arrived by small boat last year, one of the highest totals ever recorded, and a 13% increase from the year before. The promise to stop the boats now rings hollow to many voters who feel the crisis is worsening rather than stabilising. Hotels, which were supposed to be an emergency measure, remain packed. Attempts to phase them out have been overwhelmed by the continuing rise in arrivals and the slow processing of claims. And now the public is being told that military bases may need to be converted into holding centres, a move that has sparked controversy from Kent to Scotland. There is also the issue of new border enforcement powers, such as the authority to seize and inspect migrants' mobile phones. This measure, designed to dismantle smuggling networks and verify identities, has triggered a fierce backlash from human rights groups, who warn that Britain is sliding into a climate of surveillance anxiety. For a government elected on the promise of competence and control, these developments cut deep. They reinforce the perception of a state constantly reacting, never anticipating, and struggling to translate its pledges into results. Across the UK, the emotional temperature is rising. Residents in coastal towns and inland communities alike say they feel left in the dark, unsure when or how new arrivals will be placed in their area. Many emphasise that their frustration is not directed at the migrants themselves, but at what they describe as an atmosphere of disorder. They want clarity, transparency, and planning, not sudden announcements delivered after decisions have already been made. This sense of neglect has reignited tensions that erupted during the anti-immigration protests of 2025. Some demonstrations were peaceful, others turned hostile, forcing police to brace for new flashpoints. Councillors report that public meetings have become increasingly heated, with tempers fraying and fears spreading quickly online. At the political level, the pressure is intensifying. Reform UK is capitalising on public anger, presenting Labour as weak on borders. The Conservatives accuse Starmer of hiding behind bureaucratic defences. Even Labour supporters privately acknowledge that the government is wobbling on one of the issues voters care most deeply about. All of these undercurrents were on display during the committee confrontation. The MP's scepticism, the Prime Minister's strained responses, and the atmosphere of restrained frustration reflected a country on edge, a nation that feels its asylum system has drifted beyond its control. Starmer's defence rests on a single line, that the last government left behind a broken system, and Labour is now fixing it. He argues that claim processing is improving, and that the hotel numbers will drop as reforms take hold. Yet outside the committee room, the public is growing impatient. People want to see arrivals fall, hotels close, and a sense of order restored. Instead, they see a system still pushed to capacity. Military bases quietly prepared in the background and legal battles gathering pace over Britain's obligations under the European Convention on Human Rights. Trust is eroding, and each fresh surge of arrivals deepens the impression that the government is responding to events rather than shaping them. In this context, the committee clash felt like a moment of reckoning. It forced Starmer to defend not just his policies but his authority. It also raised a deeper concern that no minister could brush aside whether Britain's borders are being governed by strategy or by crisis management. As the hearing drew to a close, Starmer attempted to reclaim the narrative by insisting that the priority must be reducing claim numbers, so that hotels and temporary sites become unnecessary. But the looks exchanged among MPs suggested little confidence that the government could deliver on that promise. When the Prime Minister left the room, questions lingered in the air, not only inside Westminster, but across the country. If Labour cannot bring this system under control, what comes next? And how long before the tension spilling out in committee rooms begins to spill onto Britain's streets? Britain is standing at a knife edge. The migrant hotel scandal, far from fading, is becoming a symbol of a deeper, more structural crisis. And the most unsettling question remains unanswered. How close is Britain to a full-scale border breakdown? And what happens if the system finally gives way?
Every 7 minutes, the silence of a British street is shattered by a new machete attack. In London, the risk of a life-ending confrontation has surged by 22%. Yet the headlines you see are often sanitized to protect a fragile narrative. While the Prime Minister stands at a podium denying the existence of no-go zones, over 9,100 police officers have quietly handed in their badges and walked away. This isn't a routine staffing issue, it is a mass flight of authority from a country that feels like it's in a state of freefall. Tonight, as 361 new unregulated arrivals land on the southern coast, the streets are delivering a verdict that Whitehall refuses to hear. The British social contract hasn't just been breached, it's been liquidated. To understand the physical discord on our streets, you have to look at the machete paradox. In Starmer's Britain, a woman walking home alone faces arrest and a criminal record if she carries a non-lethal canister of pepper spray for self-defense. The law classifies her survival instinct as a firearm offense. Yet, at the same time, masked gangs carrying 20-inch zombie knives operate with near total impunity. We are witnessing the criminalization of self-preservation. With nearly 51,000 knife offences annually, the state demands total dependency on an emergency response network that is chronically understaffed and minutes or hours away. It is a security cordon around the law-abiding, while the lawless roam free.
Why are the bobbies abandoning the beat? Leaked memos from within local precincts confirm a paralysing directive. officers are reportedly forbidden from disclosing the cultural or religious background of violent suspects to protect community cohesion. Constables on the front line aren't cowards. They are institutionally gagged. They are ordered to protect the perimeters of migrant hotels with elite suppression units, while 15% of neighbourhoods are described by locals as being under parallel legal systems. This two-tier justice has driven over 9,200 demoralised officers to quit, leaving the remaining force overstretched and commanded by leaders who prioritise political correctness over public safety.
The most stunning nail in this story is the transatlantic contrast. While the UK Treasury burns £8 million a day on three-star hotels and full board for undocumented arrivals, the US has executed the most aggressive border operation in history. Under a renewed enforcement strategy, American authorities successfully deported over 1.4 million individuals in a single year. In London, however, any attempt at similar action is branded as inhumane or a violation of the ECHR. By remaining tethered to a foreign court in Strasbourg, the UK has become the soft touch of the continent, where human rights lawyers use taxpayer money to ground every deportation flight.
We are standing at the edge of an 8-year demographic clock, with arrival rates hitting 1,000 a day and birth rate projections shifting the social fabric. The UK is undergoing a permanent transformation that no one voted for. The English warning is no longer a whisper in Washington. It is a loud, shattering reality in the suburbs of Birmingham and London. The government can monitor your tweets, and they can label your concerns as extremism, but they cannot hide the receipts of a broken border. The curiosity of the viewer shouldn't be about whether the system is failing. The empty police lockers and the 7-minute machete clock have already answered that. The question is, when the new normal finally takes everything, who will be left to call for help? The silence from the palace is deafening. The standoff has begun.